Okay. Right, just check I've got the right date on this. You never know. There we go. 7th of February. Hi everyone. Welcome to all of you who I know quite well and others who I've never seen before. It's lovely to have some new people on today. So as I mentioned, we're recording this session. So if anyone has any issues with the fact that it's being recorded and wants to be omitted or anything, I can do that afterwards in post-production. Makes it sound very posh. But yeah, let me know if there's any issues there. Just ping me a private message or drop me an email at hello@nocodenortheast.com. And happy new year. Believe it or not, this is our first session since the new year. We felt it was a bit ambitious to get everyone together in the first week of January. So we're starting the first week of February, given that we do these on the first second Tuesday of the month. And welcome to, as I say, new faces that we've got. I think we are looking at the moment as to whether what we might do with some of our meetups is actually stick with kind of speakers and topics within the meetups and actually start a kind of series of sessions like this where we deep dive into products and get different people to look at different products. And possibly do those during the daytime. So it might come out with a bit of a survey, a very quick one to you in the future to find out whether what works best for people. But again, just reach out to me if you've got any particular tools that you want to see us looking at in the future in terms of no-code tools. Learning, collaborating, and getting inspired together is the reason why we're here. That's why we set up No Code Northeast. And for anyone who hasn't been before, No Code Northeast is a user group for no-code and low-code professionals and hobbyists in the Northeast. And we've been doing these getting on for a year and a bit now, with a 5-month break in the middle. But we've had some. They've all been great in terms of the meetups, but we've had some that have really stuck out. And as I say, I think we've had the most registrations for this one out of all of them so far. So obviously that I don't know whether it's just Airtable specifically or whether it's the concept of learning a no-code tool. But I'm keen to be looking at doing other ones in the future. And hi to everyone who's I can hear pinging in my ear as you join. So I just wanted, before I go into Airtable and start talking about that specifically, because I know that's what you're all here for, I wanted to talk just briefly about something that's coming soon, and that is No Code Arcade. I think some people who have been to previous events will have heard the build-up, and we've talked about this quite a lot. It is now very quickly becoming a reality because it's going to take place in June. We are still deciding final dates. I'll come on to that in a second, but it will be sort of mid third week in June this year, and it'll most likely be in Newcastle once we confirm the venue. And the idea of it is to have a conference for the no-code community, both in the Northeast, and we're hoping it will also attract people, given that there's no other, as yet, that we've found no other in-person conference happening in the UK. We're hoping that it will attract and bring people in from around the country, but certainly from neighbouring regions and up north and what have you. A little bit about what No Code Arcade will be. So we're looking at the concept of an arcade in the sense that you can come in for the period of the programme and play around with no-code tools. I think anyone who's been doing no-code knows that there's that many tools out there, that many different things you can do with those tools, that actually a lot of the time you just got to kind of get stuck in and play around with them and see what happens. And we're hoping that No Code Arcade will be a real chance to do that. So I have Platform Arcade in terms of the tools that you'll be able to try out with. We're hoping to work with a bunch of no-code providers to provide free or cheap access to different tools while we're there, and we'll hopefully be setting a number of challenges, one or two challenges over the sort of day and a half to 2 days, in the hope that people will get involved and collaborate together and work together, not just be a sort of sitting and listening to talks conference. But we will have that element, so we'll have a one-track conference. We're hoping to bring in a couple of keynote speakers, but there'll also be a call for talks, so we're hoping that there'll be some representation from the Northeast of people coming forward to talk ideas that they have. And that'll be fairly open. So we'll be launching that fairly soon in terms of a call for speakers. And also Developer Arcade, we're really keen to give a platform to people who have developed tools with no code or developed sites or products or shops or whatever it might be with no code tools, to have a bit of a platform to show off what they've done and hopefully inspire others in terms of what they could be doing as well. So that's kind of the program as a whole. There will be some workshops the day before as well. And all of that is coming as part of something that just got launched a week or so ago, called Tech Next, which is a digital festival, a tech festival for the whole of the Northeast. It's going to be around during this week, the 19th to 23rd of June. I believe there's going to be around 40 fringe events happening all over the Northeast, alongside some core events, of which No Code Arcade will be one of them. It's all still being put together. There's a lot of excitement and noise coming about from it. But if you're interested in finding out more, sign up at technext.co.uk for the festival. If you want to know more about No Code Arcade, just sign up on the No Code Northeast website, and we'll be sending all the details out through there. So that was just a bit of an insight into No Code Arcade and let you know that it's coming. For anyone who might run an agency or is involved in no code platform, we'll also have a number of sponsorship packages and what have you as well. So give me a shout if anyone wants to talk it over a bit more, and I'm happy to take any quick questions if anyone's got them right now. Shout out. I'm not sure I'll see you. Nope. Great stuff. All right, so moving on to why we're all here, and I'll try and it's late in the evening, so I'll try not to keep you too long, but I want to try and give a bit of a deep dive into Airtable. Personally, I've been using Airtable in different ways for around 2.5 years. I started off playing around with it and kind of thinking, Google Sheets does a lot of this. What's the difference between Airtable and Google Sheets? And over the last 2.5 years, and to be fair, even originally, I just hadn't delved deep enough into it, I think. And I've definitely come to discover that it's not like Google Sheets at all. There are similarities, but it's it does a lot more than that, and it's developed a lot. This is me with my little one, littlest one of 3, hence why they're slightly bleary-eyed and dulcet tones. I work at Sunderland Software City, and I also founded No Code Northeast through my work at Software City. And my Twitter details are on there as well if anyone wants to pick up after this. So just a quick sort of little animation here of showing Airtable in all its glory, you could say. As you can see just on this animation here, I'm going to go into Airtable in a bit. Don't worry, you won't be sitting watching animations all evening, but it just gives a very quick sort of feel for the various different ways in which you can use Airtable to manage and look at and visualize data and information. I'm not today, just to be clear, going to go too much into specifics around data management and that kind of thing. We do have an event coming up, I believe, run by Nathan, who's here, Nathan from Software City, around how you can make the most of your data. And if you're almost a step before jumping straight in with a no-code tool, then especially if you're based in the north of Tyne, then that's you can sign up to that through our Digital Pathfinders program. So you can find more information about that at digitalpathfinders.uk. But yeah, we're going to be focused today just on what is Airtable, what can it do, what is possible with it. I'm not going to be able to build anything of great substance in a short space of time, but hopefully we'll do something a bit practical, and as this shows, have a look at how we can see our data in different ways. Full disclosure, this is a referral link, but if you are interested in signing up to Airtable, I'm going to leave that on for a few seconds and you can take the details down. I'll also send them out afterwards through the slides, but yeah, that's an invite from me. Obviously you can just go to airtable.com and sign up there. It's a pretty simple sign up process. You get 14 days pro trial, and there's also a free access version as well once you finish a 14-day trial. So it's quite easy to get into Airtable, and with the 14-day trial, you can even really experience what the pro version is like. So what is Airtable? I think it's really important to understand the difference. You know, I made the comparison earlier on about Google Sheets and Airtable, and I think the big difference for me is that the Airtable is a database; it's not a spreadsheet. And what that means primarily for me is that it keeps the data in a much more organized state. With a spreadsheet, you can pretty much, you know, stick some data over here on a sheet, stick some data over there. It can be, you know, you can have 5 different calculators on one page. You can kind of do whatever you want. Airtable is a database, so it works in rows and columns, and if your data doesn't fit that database, then you don't get to put it in. So you have got to think about your data in a slightly different way to a spreadsheet. It's rows and columns, it's fields and types of data and what have you. So it's important to get that difference, not only because you don't put 4 different things on one sheet, but also because of the fact that that's one of the things that Airtable gets its power from. One of the reasons why it's so good as a tool. There's a significant amount of data visualization. So this could be just the fact that you can view your data in different ways using views, which we'll talk a bit about today. But also they've got some new data visualization tools which can pull off reports and dashboards and that kind of thing, which allows you to create dashboards, but also kind of almost like mini apps and various different interfaces, which is what the area of Airtable is called. So it does a lot of data visualization, some of it very good, and there's lots of flexibility in what you can do with that. Automation is something else that Airtable does. So you can automate your data. You can quite easily, through sort of no code, point and click interface, you can automate a variance of different tasks and do different things with your data triggered by different events. There is also full integration with loads of different tools out there, but also with the likes of Zapier or Make, which means that you can automate stuff in and out of Airtable and play around with it on that level as well. So there's tons of types of automation that you can use Airtable in terms of both bringing data in, taking data out, and doing things with your data inside of Airtable itself. And then integrations that I've already mentioned, but there is a suite of integrations. There's plugins which are built into Airtable, but Airtable also has, from a database perspective, has a very strong API that you can access from anything that use webs hooks, but also through the likes of Zapier and other things. You can connect it up to practically anything. There's also integrations, which I'm going to touch on a little bit today, in terms of because Airtable is a database, you can use it as the database part of application building. And a lot of the no-code app builders, whether it's web apps or native apps, often use Airtable or offer Airtable as one of the places where you can access your data from. So it does quite a lot, Airtable, and obviously we'll try and sort of touch on this on most of those things today. I kind of touched on this already, but you can use it standalone. You can use it as a sort of business tool. You can use it as a way to manage processes that you're managing, to manage data that you're gathering, and just use it as Airtable. The way that it works cost-wise, for small teams in particular, and for individual accounts, it's relatively low cost. I think basic plan is like $10 and a pro plan is $20 a month per user. Obviously, if you get much bigger teams, then that can sort of start to spiral. But there are ways and means to not have to, depend on what you want to do with it, to not have to use Airtable as your access to the data, as I talked about before, and use it actually as part of the stack, where you use something like Softer or multiple, I think Bubble and various other app builders use Airtable or can use Airtable as the data source. So you can use it as part of a tech stack so that your Airtable data stays intact. You can still use all other things in Airtable, but you can access that data to create other tools and other things as part of a full no-code stack. By stack, we mean multiple applications that you'd use together to get a certain outcome. One of the other things that I find really useful is the ability that it's interchangeable. And what I mean by that is that, for example, we use something internally in Software City called Stacker, which is a great tool for creating front ends on Airtable data. But you can also use Softer, so it means that you can actually use the same data but create multiple different types of applications from that same data. It would also mean that, for example, if you were using one front-end tool or one business app building tool to access your Airtable data, and you decide it wasn't doing the job that you required, you could fairly simply change the tool you use to access that data without having to actually change the core data at the heart of what you're trying to do. So I think that's a useful tool. I mean, much like a MySQL database or a Postgres or whatever you might use database, it's very interoperable with other software, and therefore it's quite handy to keep your information in there. And also it can be exported by CSV, Excel documents, various different formats that you can take all your data out. So generally speaking, your data isn't fixed in there, although in terms of data links and links between different sheets, which we'll come on to in a moment, that's not always that easily exportable because of the nature of the data. So what are we going to look at? What are we going to look at today? We're going to go through workspaces, which is kind of where you host all your information on Airtable. You pay per workspace, but you can have multiple sheets in a workspace. But you can also create multiple workspaces in your account. So if you wanted to have one workspace where you're hosting something for an app you were building, but a different workspace that you want to give all the team access to, you can create those workspaces and you just pay per user per workspace. So it just depends on how many people and what the makeup of those are as to how much it starts adding up to cost. We're going to look at templates. There's a mass of templates in Airtable, and some of them are great, some of them not so good, some of them are a great starting point that you'd want to build on. Some of them will just do the job you need straight away, and some of them are just not that suitable at all. Either way, it's a really quick and easy way to get started in Airtable, and even just to go in and have a look at the various different things that it does to get a feel for what it is. We'll have a very quick look at Airtable Universe, which is effectively the space where all these things come together. You can access templates, extensions of various things in there. It's as the name suggests, it's the universe where most Airtable stuff resides. And we'll look at extensions, which are effectively plugins that are not core Airtable functionality, but are extra plugins that you can access on top of your data. Some of these are very, very extensive, and some of them are just simple little tools little helper tools that can be useful to do different functions. Some of the Airtable lingo we'll look at in the first session. We'll look at bases, we'll look at tables, we'll look at fields, and we'll look at views, and I'll describe what each of those are when we get into Airtable. And then we'll have a little break at some point, just to give everyone's brain a bit of a break. So we'll have a 5-minute break at some point, and then we'll move on to automations, interfaces and integrations, and I mentioned them briefly before, but automations, we'll just have a quick look at how you can quickly change data based on different actions. Look at interfaces in terms of how you can visualize your data once you've created it, and go through some of the integrations that you can access. So let's get started. Ooh. So I'm going to come out of there and go into Airtable. Sorry, bear with me there. So this is what you'll see. Airtable do a lot of work with the sort of wizards that they want to take you through to try and get you to put data in a very user-friendly way. So it's very targeted towards people who are not particularly looking at this from a complex data perspective, which from most people's perspective is really great. From other people's perspective, you may just want to sort of skip through it all and just get to where's my data. You can do both, so don't worry about that. But you will see some things pop up here because I've used a new account specifically for going through this with you today. So you may see things pop up that are kind of, obviously you can see it's just a 14-day trial, as I mentioned before. If you sign straight up, then obviously you're not going to have that hanging around, but hopefully it'll give you a good feel of what you can do. So as I mentioned earlier on, and just give me 1 sec, I'm just going to extract this for a second. Workspaces are effectively the sort of main area where you host your bases. So everything in Airtable, as you can see by this first link here, is in a base, and a base is like a Google Doc where you can have multiple sheets. There can be multiple different types of data in there, but it's your database effectively, which is where I assume the name came from. But you can have multiple bases inside of a workspace. And as I mentioned before, workspaces are probably best to think of on the basis of billing and the basis of access. If you have a workspace, you will be paying for the pro on that workspace. If you have multiple workspaces and you want pro access, you'll pay multiple times for those multiple workspaces. Just to, in fact, it's not there. I might go later on and show you, double check the pricing, but effectively each workspace has its own billing. You can change the name of that workspace to whatever you want. You can see here you've got sharing restrictions, the billing side of things, and then there's usage statistics, which will show you how much you actually use. And the main reason for that is that Airtable does have some scaling restrictions. So for example, each base that you create in a pro account can only have up to 50,000 rows inside of it. That's across all the different sheets. So if you're thinking about building an app with Airtable, while you can get an enterprise account, the numbers start to scale differently then. That $20 can be really cost effective in terms of running an app from it for up to 50,000 rows. But if your data is tending to spiral, and if you're talking about gathering lots of data in different ways, you may want to think about whether Airtable is actually the best option for you. So that's workspaces, and as you can see here, I've created a workspace called CRM system. You can create another base. You just click on add base, and there you go. I've got an untitled base with various sort of default items in there. Got a getting started box, which will give me some information. I'm going to go into that into more detail in a minute, but just to go back to the workspace, you can now see that's an untitled base. You can change the color, put in a book, because I'm going to do my own library. And if you want to duplicate a base, move it somewhere else, set up Slack notifications, or delete it, it's dead simple. And you can move those around. So your workspace can become quite full of different databases, especially if you're using it more as a kind of personal organization tool or similar like that. So this can get quite, it's quite useful to actually use those colors as a bit of a means to visually hone in on the things that you would like to find. And I don't think anyone who's used it might be able to correct me on this, but I don't think there's any at this stage there's any particular kind of folders or anything like that. You pretty much, it's an all or nothing. All your bases are in the workspace, are just in one space. There you go. Just create another base. While we're talking. You can start from scratch, which is what I did there when I added a base, and that basically it will always create a base that's got some basic fields in, which we'll see in a second. You can upload data. So if you're working with a set of data that you've been working with already and you want to sort of Airtable that data and play with that and do something with it, you can upload that from an Excel document. I'll just quickly check on here. Excel, CSV, tons of stuff here, as you can see, Google Sheets and similar. The one thing I would say with this is just bear in mind the fact that if you, again, use a spreadsheet that you've done in, with calculators and various different things embedded or different sets of data on one sheet and what have you, it can be a bit difficult to unpick that when you try and import it. Then, so it's for clean database style sets of data. You might need to clean things up before you import them. But for most of these, it'll take you through, again, a little sort of wizard in terms of getting the most out of whatever it is that you're uploading. And the other thing you can do is upload a template, is open a template. And there's tons of templates. So if I click on Explore More Templates, there's a whole database of templates here that you can do different things with. So content calendar, if you're working in SEO on a website or something, and you want to be able to work with the marketing team around what content you're going to create. A project tracker, relatively simple project tracker, but it can be all a lot of people need. Event planning, marketing campaigns, product roadmap. There's tons of stuff here. And if I click on See All, it takes us through the template space. That is just a selection of them. In speed providing, there we go. You've got a ton of stuff here in terms of content production, featured HR recruiting. As I mentioned, in terms of the no-code arcade, you've got to kind of get in and play with this stuff, right? It's not, you're not going to instantly just be able to put something together and it'll do exactly what you want unless you've done a lot of no-code work already or database design. If you're looking for a particular template or purpose, a project tracker, for example, don't assume that the project tracker that this creates is going to be the right project tracker for you. But the great thing with Airtable is you can absolutely make it your own and customize it to the extent that it becomes the tracker that you wanted. So I'm just going to open one of these up just to sort of give a feel. It gives you a description. It gives you a bit of this is a live version of the particular template, so you can actually have a quick look at it. If we click on use template, sorry, you can add the base into your workspace, and it spins around. And as I say, you have very different. Let me just go this one. They have very different levels of templates depending on the type of information that you use. So it runs you through, like I said before, there's a lot of kind of wizarding through this. So it's, talking about reviewing your tables, which is exactly what I was saying before. It may not be exactly what you need, so it's worth just having a bit of a look through to see what it is that you need. Use different tools for categorization, and on the left hand side you'll see views, but we'll come on to views in a moment. So I just wanted to give you a bit of a feel for how a template comes in, but straight away, let's get rid of all these pop-ups. Straight away you can see all these pop-ups. You can see how much help they want to give you. You can see straight away that we've got a bunch of data in here, so we can straight away with a template go in and start changing the status of things, looking at whether those statuses suit me, and if not, changing them, looking at what different fields mean and what they do, and just generally having to play around with the types of tools that you might want to access. So that's templates. I should really go and clean up after myself, but I'm not going to. I've just noticed there's a couple of things in chat. Okay. No, I'm afraid this wasn't at Tusk Park. I'm not sure where that came from, but it's only online. Right, so templates, Airtable Universe. I won't go into this in a great detail. This is one, as you might expect with the name, you can go and explore the Airtable Universe, but effectively it's a center for templates for various different content and what have you that you can go in and have a read and have a look at. There's a ton of stuff in here. Some of it's useful. I haven't spent a huge amount of time in here, frankly, and there's you can use it for support resources and what have you. But generally speaking, if I'm looking for things with Airtable, I found the best way to do that is actually just to start with Google, like most other things these days. But if you're just getting started and you want to get a feel for the various things that people have done with it, then the universe could be quite interesting to see, read articles and that kind of thing. So the last bit on here that I'm going to talk about is extensions, and I'll actually go into go into the template that we created before, because there was some extensions already created in here. You can see on the right hand side here, and we can close it down by clicking on this link here. Extensions all appear effectively in this extra box here. What it allows us to do is take the data and sort of layer on top of it different things that we might want to access. So this is a different way of visualizing the data. You can put graphs in. But if you click on add an extension, you can see there's tons of stuff here, and quite a lot of these will be it's a pivot table, which you saw here, a chart, which you also saw here. The extensions that are made by Airtable, you can see by the little Airtable logo there. But the extensions are made by many people, so you can embed Miros into your tables, into your bases. Sorry, typeform forms, get the responses to come into your Airtable. There are tons and tons and tons of different extensions that you can use, and they all do slightly different things. So it's you know, again, if you're looking for interesting integrations, it's worth having a look in here. One thing I will say with extensions is that they don't tend to be how you say, they're not integrations as such. They generally are that sort of, as I said before, like almost like an extra layer on top of what you do with Airtable. So yeah, it is really about extending what you're doing there rather than integrating it with other things. In the most part, where you see integrations onto here, that's about pulling things in. There are some exceptions, but yeah, there are a ton of things here, as you can see. You know, QR makers, or rankers, integration with various different platforms that you may well use already. Data fetch is quite cool, and we use that to pull in, for example, the exchange rate for a program that we needed to be able to work out how much euros on a particular day, you know, different support was worth. Data fetcher helps you by pulling in the exchange rate, but it can also pull in loads of things from Instagram, Facebook, Google, all sorts of places. But there's tons and tons of extensions. We haven't got time or and we're, you know, it's not much fun going through those, but you can go through those in your own time. So hopefully, in terms of the sort of building blocks around Airtable, you can get a feel for the sort of infrastructure that's available. So you've got workspaces where you can put your bases, which we'll come on to in a second. You've got templates that you can use to pre-build various different types of bases that you might, or tools that you might want to use. You've got the Airtable universe to read articles and find other useful stuff, and extensions to be able to extend on top of Airtable. To do different things with your data and give you different options. So to keep it fairly simple for the next bit, I'm going to go through a base and look at how a base is made up. So I'm going to start with a pretty clear base rather than a template, which I think you can get a bit lost in everything that's already there. We're just going to basically put some really simple data into a base and work from there. Just the anatomy of a base. So the main space where you'd be working from initially is data. I mentioned earlier on automations. So if you click on there, you've got an interface which you can use to build automations. And I also mentioned interfaces. Yeah, it's interfaces is available too. But most of the time we'll be spending time in really, as I mentioned before, some of these things are just annoying more than they are useful. Excuse me. So what I thought I'd do is just very quickly set up a CRM system, very, very, very basic, to demonstrate some of the features of the base. You can create here different sheets within your base. Sorry, tables. I'm talking Google Sheet language. You can create different tables within your base. So if you want to just create a new table, you can click on the add here, create a blank table, and that'll create a new table. So you've got different types of data, and we'll do that in a minute. But in a minute, I'm going to start off with the first table, which is going to be people. And this is where it's important to think like a database. You know, you're gonna list one type of content or one thing in a database, not lots of different things sort of jumbled together. And you've got to keep your data clean that way, because that's part of the power of what Airtable gives over some of the more sort of spreadsheet like tools. I've already put in a simple text, single line text field here, which is a name. But in actual fact, one of the things that's always good to do is, so I'm just going to create a new single line text field and call this full name, because like a normal database, one of the things I'd suggest regularly doing is to move this data out. Is actually that this core field here is actually an auto number. So these are the different types of fields that we can do. And I'm not going to create them all, but I'll go through a couple of them. But you've got single line text. So that's obviously just one line of text. You've got long text, which could be rich text. You do have to specify that. Otherwise, it's just a longer space of text, gives you more space to write in. A date, self-explanatory. Phone number. Phone numbers I tend to find are a bit weird in terms of they tend to be very US centric. So I tend to often use single line text for phone numbers. But again, I haven't explored that in great detail. Email addresses, URLs, numbers, currency, percent, duration, formulas, auto numbers, and barcodes. There are some other types of fields which I'll come back to in a second, but they'll be available later. So what I'm going to do is change this field, this column here, and actually change that into an auto number. And what that'll effectively do is mean that we've got a sort of ID number for each individual item. So I'm just going to convert this because it was a text field, and you can see now it's come up with 1, 2, 3, and you've got the auto numbers in there. So if I create a new person now, it's automatically given the number 4. I can't edit that. It's not. It's an auto number, so it's there as a unique identifier. And I could call this KB. So just to therefore, once we've got the number in it, oh, sorry, I will change the name of this as well to ID. Once I put in an ID, just to explain the difference between this and this number here, the number on the left-hand side here is literally what number it is in the order that it's in. So I could, for example, move number 2 down, and it's still got the ID of 2, but it's in the 3rd position. So that's why it's useful to put an ID on there, because the numbers that are here are just the order in which you're looking at the data to help you kind of navigate how many records you've got in there. In the most part, having an ID number means that you'll have a really easy way to identify what you're doing. So this is person number 1, and that's John. Within a CRM, obviously, I've put in full name here, but maybe actually what we're going to look at is, well, yeah, first name and last name. So I'm going to put in another single line field. I'm going to call this last name. Oop. I'm going to create the field and just quickly change that one to be first name. And we can put in various, whatever it might be that will be in here. All right. So first name and last name. So looking at some of the other fields that we've got here, we can put in a long description. So this could be a bio, for example, for a person in here. And long text. As I mentioned before, you can enable rich text formatting. So if you put that on, then obviously you can use bold, italics, that kind of thing in the text. I'm going to leave it off for the long text that we're creating. But you can put in a long text A, so it gives us more space. You can also use the little item there to be able to pull it out and fill out longer text if you want to. So that's long text. You can have an attachment. An attachment could be anything from a file about that person, or it could be an image, or let's say profile picture. You can create a field, and you can upload fields into there. Pictures into there. You just select files. You can also do various different, grab your files from various different places. So you could use a link if you've got one to a particular image. You can do a web search for that image. You can take a picture. I'm not going to do that. You can use Google Drive if that's your place where you keep all your images or files or folders or whatever. So you can really, from the attachment perspective, you can really pull attachments from pretty much anywhere. And there's loads of things you can do with scripting as well to pull attachments in as well. But obviously, for the most part, you're just going to be uploading an image in this case. Checkboxes, I'm not going to put in, but you can get what that is. It's an on-off checkbox. It can be useful to identify people in a certain way. Multiple select allows you to select multiple, so we'll put some of those in. We'll put favorite. It's not going to be the most useful CRM, by the way. It's for showing the functionality, not for how good it is. So if we put in red, green, blue, orange, and like my kids, you've got to have at least 2 favorite colors. So you can pick from here multiple amounts because we did a multiple select. So you can say I put in red and also blue, or you can just put 1 in, so on and so forth. Single selects working pretty much the same way, but obviously you can only select one of them. If you put in here title, for example, and you add in the options, you put in Mr. Miss, etc. And you can add in as many options as you want. You've got colors that they automatically kind of assign. It's just done kind of automatically, but you can go ahead and change those colors to whatever you like. I find it's quite a useful way of sort of visualizing the data, as it were. I'm going to bring title along here. If you want to move something, you just literally move it across like that. So we can put in this Bruno Jones. Didn't quite put that one up. There we go. So yeah, you can start to see how this kind of comes together. And single select, obviously, stating the obvious here, but single select, you can only select 1. Don't want to see that. Right, moving along a bit. So we can select users. So if you've got multiple users, this could be for assigning tasks to people, for example. It could be for various different things, just tagging people in. Anything you can think of that you would want to link a user to, you could do that. Obviously, it's a one user system for me, so there's not much use of putting that in, but it's handy. Date, so we could put date last contacted. Dates work in various different formats, so depending on how you want to present your date. Generally, they input and output within the sort of standard date format, but in terms of how you visualize things here, generally speaking, it will default to the sort of American format, so better to put it into European. You can include a time if you want to, 12-hour or 24-hour. You can work with time zones. Anyone who's done that will know it's no fun, but you can do that and display the time zones as well. But yeah, so if I leave it date format European, I can say when they were last contacted and just use the date pop-up like that. So we can say when these people were last contacted. And you get the idea. I'm just going to quickly check if there's any other sort of key areas. Phone number and email should be self-explanatory. URL is a link, but could be a link to an email as well if you want to use that in an application or similar. So mail to or something similar. Numbers will restrict whatever you're putting in there to be a specific number. So you can use decimals, percentages. You can do it whole numbers, whatever you want to sort of restrict that number field to be. So that's useful in terms of being sure you get the right kind of data from people. Currency, dollars, pounds, you get the idea. There's a separate thing for percentage as well. Duration, rating, which there's various different outputs of, whether it's stars, similar. And then some of these we're going to come back to in a second. So a formula is super useful, and a formula is how you can get you can get a lot of power out of data inside of Airtable. There's far too much in here for me to kind of go into any depth on, but if you can imagine most things that you can do in a spreadsheet within cells in terms of formula, you can do pretty much the same stuff here. But you can do it on the fly and with fields from any of the bases that you're using at any time. and it'll create effectively a field within your database. So you can do some pretty advanced stuff with this. The examples it gives here are sort of straightforward ones. So amount times price, average field, field one and field two, name and date. So you can have output a name with a date next to it. If statements, so you can say if this, then print this and show this. Pretty much, if you can think of it, as I said, from a formula perspective, you can add it. And there's a ton of, if you click on the learn more there, there's a ton of information about the formula field reference and how many things you can do. And again, I'm not going to go through them all, but you'll recognize these if you've used Excel or Google Sheet formulas. Super powerful, super interesting things that you can do. And they become really handy. They're really handy anyway, but they become really handy when you're looking at app development, that kind of thing, because you can start doing quite complex calculators or adding, creating URLs out of, or slugs or whatever out of the titles of items, and loads of different things that just, you wouldn't normally be able to do. So formulas are super useful in terms of advanced or more advanced output. There's a formatting on there as well. It depends on what it is that you output as to how it will allow you to format, so you kind of have to put something in there. But again, there's probably far too much in there to give a long session on today. And as I mentioned, with the roll up, count, and lookup, I'll come back to those in a second once we've created more tables in our base. If you add in created time, last model, so if we put in created time, again, you put it on European, include the time if you want to. When you create that field, it'll put in the created time for you. So it's it's putting in when the item was made. Likewise, where's the? Sorry, one sec. I've got an ultra wide monitor, but it would look pretty rubbish for you all if I widen it out too much. You've got last modified by as well, so that you can see who it was last modified. Sorry, last modified time. So you can see when it was last modified, which again is kind of like a system field that it'll fill automatically in the format that you request. Created by and last modified by will add in the user automatically in terms of who created it and who last modified it. I think it's good that they leave them out of there, because a lot of the time you just don't need that stuff, but it's really useful also to be able to put it in. And generally speaking, when you put the field in, if you add it in later, it'll fill out all the data with when it was actually created and when and who it was actually created by, even though it's historical data. Order number we've discussed, barcode, again, probably more useful in terms of apps and things like that, but useful for some people, and you can create buttons that create actions, and that will come into in the automation side of things as well. So that's a table and that's fields. Hopefully you've got a good feel for the sort of at least the base level of fields that you can put into Airtable. Just before I kind of move on to some more advanced fields and then views, does anyone have any questions? Burning questions? No? Alrighty. Okay, so moving on a bit, what I'm going to do is with our really advanced CRM system, I'm going to create another table and I'm going to call this organizations. I'm not going to go in and put a huge amount of data in here, but I want to show you how tables can link up, because I think this is useful. So I'm going to do the same as I did last time. I'm going to edit this field. I'm going to give this an auto number because I think it's useful to have IDs. And when we create the links between different tables, you'll see that actually IDs have another use, despite the fact that it gives them a sort of unique identifier. I'm going to create another field that I'm going to make a single line text, and I'm going to call this organization name, and create that field. and I'm going to put in a few organizations. These are generally the ones that they put in by default, by the way: notes, assignee, and status. It's almost like everything's a task system or something, but you can just literally go through and delete those. Maybe assignee is useful, even though it's only me in the system, but in a CRM to an organization might be something you want to have in there. So I'm going to put in a few organizations in here. So Sunderland Software City, Dynamo Northeast, and Digital Catapult, NETV. Sorry for anyone from Software City, not very original, but there you go. So we've got 3 organizations in our database now. We've got a number of different people. So, you know, CRM, what would you normally do? Then you have some kind of link between these things, right? So if we go back to our people list here, and next to last name, you can, if you click on the side here, you can obviously edit fields. I'd be very careful of doing what I did before, which is kind of literally converting a field into a different field type. It'll give you lots of warnings. You can really break data potentially if you've got a lot of data in there and you go and edit the field. But sometimes you might just want to change the field name or something. I've found that if you're doing integrations, for example, sometimes they need to do matching. You know, they need to match the field name needs to match external data, so you might need to change it for that purpose or whatever. But yeah, I wouldn't edit the fields too much. But what you can do from here quite easy is duplicate the field, but insert left or insert right. And so for now, we're going to insert right. We're going to do a new field. And what I'm going to do, it actually comes up at the top here, is link to another record. So I'm going to create the organization for this record, and I'm going to link it to another record. And it brings up which table do I want to link it into. So obviously for people, I want to link it to organizations. So I'm going to create a link to organizations called organization. I'm not going to allow linking to multiple records. I'm going to assume that someone works for one organization at a time. Big assumption in the CRM world, as people will know, but there we go. Limit record selection to a view will come on to views after this. So I'll explain more about that in a minute, but we're going to create a link to the organization for now. So I'm going to create our field. Before, when we were looking at the fields, you may have seen that one of them was called lookup. And what it's saying here is that we can actually add in fields. And again, this is some of the real power of Airtable. It's going to join a person to the organizations that we've got in the other table. But with lookup fields, what we can actually do is pull data from that other table. So in this case, the organizations table, we've got organization name, notes, and assignee. And you can actually bring those lookup fields into our people space. To give you an example where that could be useful, which we're not going to do here because we're going to skip it, but if we did want to do it, you might, for example, want to have the organization's telephone number pulled through into the person so you can quickly see who the organization is, or the organization's web address, or whatever it might be. You can pull any of that data back through into the people. So when you're looking at the people database, you can see any data from any of the tables that you want to create lookups with. Probably more useful on the other side of things from, you know, looking up the people on the organization, but there we go. So we're not going to pull through any lookup fields on here, but I think it's useful to understand what that is, because it can be super handy for certain things. So if we want to add our organization now, we can click on here and we can, it's actually shown us by the IDs, but we can see Digital Catapult, Dynamo Northeast, Sunderland Software City. So I'm going to say this person works for Sunderland Software City. I'm going to say that works for Dynamo Northeast, and this one works for Digital Catapult, and this one works for Sunderland Software City. Probably on the organization state, we can still have an ID, but not have it as the core number. But what is useful with using IDs in this way is that what you can find is when you create links, instead of having the long text of a name or whatever, it just has numbers in. If you're doing, say, activities in a CRM, and you might have 20 or 30 activities attached to an organization, that using that ID can be super useful. Just to demonstrate one more of the sort of lookup fields that we're looking where we're joining data, we've now got 4 people with 3 different organizations. If we come back to our organization now, you can see it's automatically created a field here for people, and that's automatically linking back to the records that we created in the people area. The other thing that we can add in is what we call a count or a roll-up. A roll-up will do similar to a count, but we'll start a count first because it's the simplest one. So literally what that's going to do is count up the number of people from the people field that are referenced to that particular organization. So we can call this number of employees, create that field, and it automatically counts up the number of items that we've referenced there. So it instantly got a real-time field within our database that's adding up every time that we add a new employee to that, a new person to that organization. And it'll wrap that, it'll count that number up. Roll-ups work very similar, but what roll-ups will do is that you can actually specify a field. We don't really have one in here. If we could maybe say, I'll put one in to demonstrate. If we insert a number here, insert a number, and we give it only integers, so full numbers, whole numbers, and we call this age. We create the field. I'm just going to put some random numbers in here: 25, 29, 39, 39. So when we've got age in there, it could be anything, right? It could be whatever. Just age was an easy one off the top of my head. What we can then do is instead of creating a count field, we can create the roll-up field, and roll-up field similar. So we can say average age of employees. Probably never want to do this. I'm doing an HR nightmare here, right? But anyway, so you'd roll up people, which is the reference field that we've got, and you choose the field. And in this case, we'll look at age, and then we've got this. It says aggregation formula. So it's just asking about what do we want to pull out. So we can put in sum, and that will give us the total age of everyone there. But what we actually want to do is put in average, and it gives us nice little reminders here of how to actually put it in. Just click on it, click on create field. We get an average age there from the people data. So then if we add someone else in who's called Mr. Bob Thornton, and we say they belong to Sun Software City, which is the number one, and we put the age in here just to make it obvious of 92. Then when we go back to our organization, we'll be able to see it's 3 employees and the average age has gone right up to 59. So with sums, with roll-ups, with functions, with the references to different spaces, you can start to get into really quite complex data sets and data systems in order to manage your data. The last bit I'm going to cover on this section, then we're going to have a short break, is about views. So once we've got our data in here, we can create different views. So I'm going to go back to people here. So views are a way to sort of separate out the data, and it's but also to visualize it in different ways. I haven't added in a load of images, but we can go back to our template in a minute to have a look at this as well. But you can have all sorts of different types of views of your data. This your database is the bit that feels like a spreadsheet, let's say, but you can do lots of things with this. So the first thing you can do is you've got a form view. So if, for example, you wanted to allow new members of new people to add themselves to your CRM, which by the way hasn't got any contact details or anything in yet, but hey, what the heck. You can just create a form for it. So you can say, is it collaborative? Is it personal? So it's just for certain people, or is it locked for very specific people? We're going to say it's collaborative. We're going to create a new view. And effectively what it does is pulls out that data and creates a form for you. And that's quite handy, as you can probably imagine. It's also a data disaster if it's not used properly, but it's handy in terms of being able to pull that data in. So particularly useful for internal business tools, that kind of thing. And much like Google Sheets and various other Microsoft Sheets and things have a very similar functionality, but you can literally create a form very quickly that allows you to give other people access to put data into your database. You can add in logos, cover images, various other bits. You can sort of, if you want to not have title in there, you can move it out of the form. The drag and drop for everything, very much no codey. You can create new organizations from there if you want to allow it. And every field has different settings that you can go in and add some help text. You can make them conditional, you can make them required or not required. And you can also remove it as I've demonstrated already. So pretty powerful in terms of what you can do with the forms, and that allows you to pull data in. You know, obviously you have to be careful, because if you're given public access to forms, you want to make sure that it's public data that you're following all the regulations and best practice for in terms of gathering that and holding it in an Airtable database. Another example is a calendar. So we'll create a calendar from that view. We're going to choose which date, so we can see, we want to see a calendar when people were last contacted, and click OK. Sadly, because I use the ID, you can only see the number there, but you can see the person, and you can go in and access their records. You can expand record and see that that's Mr. John Bloggs, or so on and so forth. And if I've done it correctly, I'll try and correct it after the break, but you'd be able to see the name in there rather than the number. A gallery view, it's not really going to do much, so there's not much to see there, but if you've got images uploaded, then you can have a look in. I think if we go back to our content calendar, if we create a gallery view here, create new view, you can see it creates kind of cards which use the images in various different fields to have a look at that data. So again, it can be really useful for looking at things like content and other, you know, whether it's user profiles or something along those lines. So go back to here. You've got Kanbans, you've got timelines, which you only get with Pro. Anything that's got a little Pro thing, obviously you only get access to if you're got the Pro account. Lists, Gantt charts, and also new sections. If you wanted to group these together into different sections, you can do so. The other way in which views are really useful is not just different ways to display the information, but also, but it could also be useful in terms of what information you're showing. So if we imagine this as being this grid view, we can duplicate this, create a new one. I will call this contacts that like blue. And then you can start to use these bits at the top here to do various different bits of grouping, sorting, various different things to change how that data is displayed, or change what data is displayed. So if we wanted to filter it, we can put in a condition that says that their favorite color is exactly blue. When we do that, we've got a view that shows us all the contacts that light blue. So if we wanted to have multiple ways of, so you could, for example, in the CRM, you could be recording which mailing list people signed up to. You could create a view where you can see all the people who signed up to the Software City mailing list, so you can see all the people who signed up to the NoCo Northeast mailing list, and so on and so forth. You can use it to segment your data in any way that you want. And it can be quite useful in terms of having quick and easy access to bits of your data. As well as filters, you've got groups as well. So if we wanted to, let's take that filter out. And instead of filtering by color, we could group by color. So if we group by favorite color, it pulls out and it shows you how shows you the people who haven't, in this case, got it's empty. Let me just open this up a bit for you. So for some people, it's empty. You can see some people have got red and blue. Well, there's only one of them. Anyone who's got green and anyone who's got blue, and so on and so forth. So you can kind of pull that out. You could say group it by title instead of that, and then you can see who's a Mr. and Mrs. and Miss. So you get the idea. Group by organization. So you can start to use these tools to look at your data and analyze your data in different ways. You've got to bear in mind with Airtable, if you do filters and groups and you can sort as well, if you use those, when you leave them in a view, they'll stay in the view, right? They're not going to reset to something else. So anyone else in your organization, whatever, who comes and looks at that is going to see them grouped by that field or filtered by that filter. So it's just worth remembering that if you do that, you know, if you've got a full database of contacts here, for example, and you filter them by people from Newcastle, and someone else comes to that screen, that's not that useful for them because they might want to see people from Durham, for example. Does that make sense? All right. So I think in terms of the sort of overview of the data and what have you, we've covered quite a lot there. We're going to take a five or so minute break and come back at 7:15. I'll do about 45 minutes more, mostly 30-35 minutes looking at integrations, automations, and some of the more kind of, let's say, advanced bits. And then, yeah, we'll have a quick wrap up, but I'm happy to take questions and stuff then. I will just check in at the start when we come back in 5 minutes for any questions as well. So if you've got them, have them ready. I'll be ready to answer those. But I think it's high time for a break. So if we come back here at 7:15, should be enough time for everyone to grab a cuppa and come back and be refreshed. Is that all right? Great stuff. All right. See you in 5 minutes at 7:15. Cheers, guys.
Fingers crossed, 5 minutes of charging on my headphones are going to be enough. All right. Hi, everyone. I hope 5 minutes was enough. I'm just wary I've got quite a lot more that I wanted to give you a view of going forward. So I know there's a couple of questions. Francis?
Yes, thanks. Thank you for doing this, Adam, I should say as well. Thank you for hosting this thing and doing it. I feel like I'm catching up on bits I missed with Ben's course in December. I joined Airtable maybe a month ago or so just to have a look at it, play around with it, and imported a Excel sheet and, you know, did all that stuff. The first thing I was going to say was that you started talking a lot about the billing and stuff like that. And I'm just a simpleton, so I'm hoping most of it's free. Nobody's asked me for any credit card details yet. I haven't had much of a chance to play with it since I started with it, but because I've been doing loads of other things. But
Sure.
Yeah, is there a basic free one?
Yeah, there is. One of the downsides, I think, of Airtable, could be wrong, but yeah, it's when you click on Airtable, you can't actually see the various, you can't see the website, you see what I mean? It's one of those apps that kind of takes over the domain name. If I go to upgrade, I think, there you go, right. So you've got a free plan, and inside the free plan, you get unlimited bases, which is great. Up to 5 creators or editors, useful. Unlimited comments, read-only users. You can use the interface designer that I'm going to talk a little bit about now. And you can have 1 extension per base, 1 sync integration. The biggest thing on the free ones is kind of the amount of use. So you get 1,200 records, which again, if you're doing a basic CRM for you, for your own business, for example, is more than enough. But if you were looking at something where, you know, you got 20 or 5 users, and you're looking at everyone keeping all their contacts in there with organizations and people and activities, and you know, it soon starts to mount up. So as you move up on that billing, it just basically gives you more of everything, if you see what I mean. So you get 3 extensions on a what do they call it, a basic plus plan. 3 extensions, 3 sync integrations, 5,000 records per base. 5 gigabytes of attachments, custom branded forms, so on and so forth. And if you want to do anything sort of majorly external with it and have a decent scale, then you probably need to pro plan. You can have 10 extensions, 7 cloud integrations, 50,000 records per base. And then you got enterprise where go on, sorry.
I was just going to say 1 extension per base for the free one.
Yeah,
that's a little limiting, isn't it? But I can get one because they can be useful. So,
yeah, and again, it's not for everything or everyone. I think as I said before, the pricing's really good. Like if you're using this for building an app, for example, it's relatively low data, then getting a pro account at $20 per month to be your database system that you can play, it's actually all right. Do you know what I mean? If you're, you know, if you've got a 20-person company and you want all 20 people to have access to Airtable, then obviously that starts to ramp up because you've got 20 times 20 seats. And not only that, if you had multiple different workspaces you want to give them access to, that becomes even more. You may decide to do departmental workspaces, in which case, you know, you just,
I'm not going there.
But you get.
But I get it. I get it. And I was more interested in the free bit. And my other question was, I think the other thing about signing up for it and using it, it keeps asking for all my, you know, pals' user data, which I thought was an old thing that happened with apps when you were, you know, 20 years ago. They want you to sign up your whole contact list. There's always that question in it. And it's, you know, it's tad annoying if you ever get the feedback to anyone at Airtable. But there might be a way around that. I keep cancelling it, but I got a little bit edgy on that because I don't like sharing, you know, my contact list.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, Francis, I think, you know, they pay per user and therefore they're just trying to get more money, right? So
I understand why they do it. I just, to be fair, it's a little, you know.
Yeah, to be fair, they do it right when you first sign up, and they ask you kind of what type of business have you got, and then effectively say add your team in and what have you. After that, I don't think I've not noticed that it's sort of popping up all the time, but you know, it's something, you know, through these times.
And I thought an answer to that question. But anyway, maybe just me. So there you go. It's another thing.
No, I'm with you on that. You know, no worries. And effectively, you know, I think with the fact that they give away a fairly comprehensive free plan is they're trying to find their way to up that, if you see what I mean, and get more people involved.
I fully get it, but you know, especially if you're part of a big organisation of 100,000 people, you know, it's just not. You do it, and you sort of mix your email and stuff. But anyway, I'm not sorry. Don't worry.
No, I get it. I think no problems at all. Right. So, does anyone else have a question before we move on? Cool. What I'm going to do now is probably just show you a few different examples rather than going too much into individual integrations, automations, that kind of thing, because I think, it would take too long, and also, you know, doing it with certain amounts of data is difficult. I'm going to show you automations first. So let's think of a little automation. I hate this pop-up that we could do. We can create a new field in here, and we can say we want to call a new field that we're going to insert right, and we're going to call this authorized. I have no idea what they're authorized for, but we're going to make a checkbox called authorized, and then I'm going to create a authorized by, I'm going to give that a user. You create the field. Okay, so for a little automation, so I'm going to go to automations here. And automations work like most automations you'd expect in these sorts of no-code tools. Effectively, it's kind of a trigger and then an action that's going to happen with it when the trigger happens. And you can see there's some sort of off-the-shelf ones almost. Yeah.
I think you might be sharing a different window.
Yeah. Something's not going right.
That's weird. 1 second. I'll just unshare. I'll unpause the sharing 1 second. There we go.
Oh,
right, can you see that now?
Yeah.
Is that there? Good. Sorry, I'd paused the sharing on the break, so there you go. So you won't have seen anything. I was actually had the costings up and the various different things you get as a costings. You won't have seen any of that. There we go. Sorry about that. Okay, so this is automations. So flicking from our data, which is here. You can click on automations here, and automations will work on a per base level, because obviously you might want to do automations between different different tables within that base. Some of the sort of typical automations that they've got here is you can send an email You can send a Slack message. So if you integrate with your Slack, you can make it so that when X is updated, then a Slack message is sent to a certain Slack channel or similar. You can update a record, send a weekly digest, all sorts of stuff that you can do here. And then this is where you can kind of literally make the automation that you want to make. So if I go to automations, say when a record matches conditions. So this is useful, for example, if a record has moved into a certain view or in fact enters a certain view, sorry. So this could be if it's got a certain category, if it's got if you've checked that box, for example, that I just created. You can do it when a form is submitted, when a record is created. So when one record is created in people, for example, you could make a lookup so that it creates an organization based on that person. When the record's updated, when a record enters a view, so when I talked about, you can make filters on the different records and so on and so forth at a scheduled time, and when a webhook is received. There's some straight integrations here. It just depends a bit on what you use as to whether they're useful or not. You can make an integration with Google Calendar. So when an event is created in Google Calendar, then do something in your Airtable. When a row is created in a Google Sheet, then put something, do something with Airtable. When you've received an email to a certain email address or with a certain title, you can get some of that data and put it into your Airtable information and so on and so forth. There's a bunch of integrations there. Not many, to be frank, in terms of what's possible if you start using something like Zapier, but it's still quite useful. So if we, for example, say when a record matches conditions, don't know why you gave me that quite. It's a bit over the top, but there we go. So when a record enters certain conditions, we've got this sort of settings pane over here. When it matches certain conditions, we're going to say it's in the people space, and when it's we're going to add a condition that it's when authorized is checked, and then we click on choose records to check this. And of course, I'm doing a test and there's no records that are checked, so it's not going to find any. So let's just check one. Go back to our automations. Choose a record. I'm not sure why it's taking so long. It's my internet connection. I'll tell you what, we'll try user suggested record. Right, don't know why that's taking so long. The joys of live demos. Right, I'm just going to go ahead and look at the actions. So we can send an email, we can create a new record, as I mentioned before. We can update a record, we can find records. So for example, by clicking authorized, if I'd created activities as a table, I could create an activity that said this person authorized this thing at this time, and that creates an activity that's linked to that person. I could send a message to my Slack channel that says this person has been authorized. You can now access their details on the CRM. So you get the idea. And again, I won't go through all the details of that, but the automations are pretty powerful in terms of doing stuff inside of Airtable. For me, the automations here, if you want to do things outside of Airtable, I would generally suggest, if you can afford it, that something like Zapier or Make is a better option. It gives you a lot more tools to your disposal in general. But some of the off-the-shelf simple ones like sending Slack messages and things are quite useful. And again, you can post a tweet. Dangerous, by the way, posting tweets from a system like this, but there you go. Create a post on your Facebook pages, so on and so forth. So from a social media management, it can be quite useful. And again, you've got all the Google tools there, Teams messages, all sorts of things. So there's quite a bit of integration in terms of the actions that you can run after doing that. Yeah, but as I said, even things like sending emails, they are all, for example, from my experience, most emails that are sent from Airtable, there's not that much power over how those records look. So if you wanted to send emails from doing an action inside of Airtable, I'd probably use something like MailerLite or similar, where you can make nice templates the way you want them, and then use that Zapier to trigger the automation and to send the data to MailerLite. That's a bit more advanced. It'll take a bit more time, but obviously you can then make the email look exactly how you want, and you've probably got more chance of deliverability as well with external tools. So it just depends on how far you want to go. But there's a good suite of actions in there that you can do effectively off the shelf. Once you've done automations, it will, funnily enough, one of the little tips I would give is always try and make the logic within your automations, because you can do conditional actions. So you can say only run this automation if so, if you know X, Y, and Z are the case. So only send a Slack notification to authorized if the assigned person is Adam Hill, for example. Make sure that the logic inside of your Airtable automations ends up with the result. If you leave it with a kind of dead end, or that it doesn't answer, you know, it doesn't answer, the logic isn't answered by the end, it does throw up errors. Weirdly, the automation still runs, it still does whatever you ask it to do. But if it hasn't understood that it's ended, then you can get some errors, and that can be quite annoying in terms of constant email notifications that you've got errors. There is a notifications bit. Sorry, I'm just having to move this around a little bit because move that out of the way. There is notifications up here where errors and things will come through, but also a lot of the time, if you've got it set up, which I have, you'll receive notifications by email as well. I think that's as far as I've gone on automations. Does anyone have any questions about automations before I move on? Again, you know, I'm trying to cover as much for as many people as possible. There's probably very specific use cases that you might have, and I'm more than happy, whether it's at the end of today or another point, to pick those up with people. So that's automations. Interfaces, again, it's probably best for us to look at with some full data. So we'll have a look at one of the templates maybe. But interfaces is relatively straightforward to get some really good data out of your base and show that in a kind of dashboard format. So let's just give it a quick try. So we'll just call it interface. We'll color it green for a laugh. And then we can show, so you can show record reviews. So you can show like output of what different records look like. This can be quite useful if you want to almost build an application that your teams can use. You can show dashboards, which is the sort of data visualization stuff. So you can, you know, bring a lot of your data in and create graphs out of it. Record summaries, so you can give a list of records and put in filters and that kind of thing, but in a more kind of user-friendly way than just a sort of database format. And you can actually create forms and things as well. And all the interfaces you can, you've got permissions on them, so you can use them internally within Airtable, or you can create sort of private pages with passwords on them that people can access, or you can make them open to the public. So you can sort of build kind of mini apps out of these things. And if we have a quick look at dashboards, you can get a feel for the power. So if I put in the table that we want to do is people. I'm going to put a filter of none, so we want to see all of our records. The number one, we'll leave that. I'll tell you what, I'm just going to create it and then we can get inside and we'll call this dashboard. And we finished. So this is just one of their usual pop-ups that tells you different things that you can start to do, but they are updating interface designer and interfaces a lot, and you can kind of see why, because these are useful tools. And one of the ways in which Airtable's being used a lot as a database, as I said, for external apps. I think you can see Airtable moving more and more to become that kind of all-in-one package. I'm not sure interfaces is the best way to do that in terms of building, you know, it doesn't give you the flexibility, particularly in terms of user access control, that a lot of other systems will, but it's still useful. And so this interface, so it's counted the number of items as 5. You can see here it's pulled out Miss, Mr, and Mrs, the number of people who have got those particular items, and it's pulled out a graph with similar stuff in it. You can then go in and sort of change and build this to be whatever you want it to be. So if I click on that one, you can see at the moment, it's just pulling through all records. But let's say we wanted to specific records, we can put in a condition and we can say is authorized, or let's just say is authorized, and check that. Then obviously we can see that there's just that one item that we had authorized, and we can go in then and just change this to say authorized people. Obviously it's very limited in terms of what data you've got in there, but you can quickly see that you can pull up a dashboard that starts to give yourselves, you know, we could talk about number of people in different organizations. You can have that, you can create filters so that you can have all this data based on just a particular organization. Again, just to be really clear on interfaces, probably the hardest bit with Airtable interfaces in terms of, say, building really functional tools is the user access level. It's not all or nothing, but depending on how many people you've got in your you know, if you're a one person building something that you want to give different companies access to, for example, Airtable interface isn't really built for that, because when you give them access and they've got a drop down, choose your company, everyone will see everyone's company. You can't just kind of, you could give people a passworded access to their one interface, but then you'd have to duplicate that interface each time. Then if you want to go in and change the interface across the board, you'd have to change each individual thing, each individual interface. And that's where sort of, you know, for me, the interfaces to a degree has its major kind of restrictions. That's where integrations comes in, and where the sort of no code power can really come from in terms of using Airtable. And as for this, for as I said before, what I'll do is I'll just give you a bit of an overview, and I'm going to handle this carefully because of the fact that I want to be very careful about personal data, although there's not a huge amount in here. But we use in at Southern Software City, we use a system called Stacker, and Stacker is effectively an app development system that allows you to view Airtable data, quickly and easily create interfaces that allow you to look at that data in different ways. And I can't go through, as you can probably imagine, a wide range of the areas in here, but just to give you a bit of a feel, this is the projects page. So we just got a table inside of Airtable that's called projects, where we uploaded an image, a title, and which team they belong to, and a bunch of other data. And you can quickly and easily show that information like this. Then you can use Stacker to do things like add a new project in. So you can create nice forms that will add that information straight into the database. You can filter things. So like I talked about before, we can just pull out which of the Software City projects, active projects. We can create a pipeline, because you can have different ways to view that information. And all of the various different, you know, we created a booking system, we created an event system, various different pages that we created from an Airtable database that allow us to effectively create exactly what software we want using the data from an Airtable database. Stacker does actually have its own database system. You can use that if you want, but the joy of having it in Airtable is that we can then access that in other places. So to give you a little example of how that can be used, we use Eventbrite, which many of you may know at Southern Software City. We create most of our events on Eventbrite. When we create an Eventbrite event, it appears in our system in the events area, so it appears in our calendar once it's live on Eventbrite. So all the information about that event is brought into our Airtable, which is then visible in our Stacker system. We then have it integrated, and this is done using Zapier that I mentioned before, that all of the attendees, so when they register for an event, those attendees go into the database as well. It checks if there's a person already in the database with that email address. If there's not, it'll create that person, and therefore we get, you know, a list of the people who attended that event, but also against each individual contact, we get all of the events that they attended. The other bit of sort of no code joy that you can then get from that being all in an Airtable database is it using a system called WhaleSync, which if you didn't see it, there's a really great talk by the WhaleSync founder on our YouTube channel from December. WhaleSync allows you to sync data from Airtable to various different places, and it's really, really easy to do. But one of the great places to be able to do that is to a website. So we take events, for example, that have gone from Eventbrite into our Airtable database so that we can capture all of that data in one place. And then we publish those events by checking publish on the website into the website without any sort of intervention or anything other than just basically ticking a box. So the integration side of Airtable, while there is the sort of basic integrations that you can access that I showed you earlier on, whether it be through automations, through plugins or other things, there's also the ability to be able to use various different systems to plug into your Airtable data and create apps and much bigger systems on top of what Airtable can do. Excuse me. That's just one example. Another system that we use is called Jotform, which some of you may know. So instead of Airtable forms are great, it's a super useful kind of out the box. You can just create a form within your system pretty quickly. But Jotform allows you a lot more power in terms of, for example, conditional fields. It allows you a lot of power in terms of automating emails being sent to people. You can generate PDFs from those forms. So if you've got signatures and that kind of thing, you can instantly generate a PDF that goes out. People says, here's your signed document. But all that data can then go into Airtable and be accessible and built upon within your database as well. So Jotform and Airtable integration is really good. There's a basic integration that you can do for free where you just literally kind of integrate any data that goes into your Jotform goes into a sort of replicated Airtable base. But there's also Zapier integration where in our complex CRM system that we built, our complex monitoring system we built that are demoed here with a lot of different data in there. We push, for example, the part of the data which is about a person into the people bit, part of the data which is about an organization into the organization bit, part of the data which is about the event they attended into the event bit, part of the data about the activity they did into the activity, and we also register an activity that says they filled out this form on this date so that we know we've captured that data as well. So with Zapier, you can really do, you can be sort of pushing that data out to multiple places within what can be quite a complex Airtable sort of base structure. And I can't show you it because, again, just in terms of data protection, it wouldn't be right. But you can get really, you can get really, I wouldn't even call it complicated. You can get really vast with what you can do in Airtable. And because of the various different integrations that are available, whether it's bringing data in, taking it out, or using database Airtable as your kind of core database for app development or similar, it's a really powerful tool. You can see the integrations that are available on the Airtable integrations page. As I mentioned before, a lot of the power that I've found with Airtable really comes from Zapier or my understanding is Make or was in Integromat. It's a little bit cheaper and also has most of the same functionality. But even out of the box in terms of what they advertise, you can see there's a lot of the biggest tools that are out there. It's already doing various types of integrations with, like a lot of these systems, like Monday.com or similar, which the out of the box integrations tend to be quite subscribed. You kind of have to do it the way that they do it, as it were. What you get with the likes of Zapier and similar is being able to literally do whatever, move your data in whatever way that you see fit. As I mentioned before, one that's also really useful in terms of integrations is Data Fetcher, and well worth a look. Again, it's another subscription, you have to pay for it, and it depends on what you're trying to do. But if you're looking at social media management, for example, you can be pulling all your stats from your different social media channels into one place. You can be using the integrations here to push your social media out, so you can be writing
writing your social media posts in Airtable and pushing that out. You can be when you start a new project or something, you can have I've started a new project with so and so, and popping into your various channels. It's kind of endless in terms of what you could potentially be doing with this. Obviously, I'm kind of just throwing things out there, but as you go through a process of understanding what your data is, what you want to do with it, then you can really Airtable is a really good option in terms of being the central place for that. As I mentioned earlier on, Nathan, are you still on? Roland? Maybe not. Nathan's doing a talk about data. Oh, there he is. Do you want to give a quick 2 minutes, Nathan? Sorry, I am just for anyone who hasn't realised, I've totally put Nathan on the spot.
Sorry, yeah,
I just thought it might be worth
working in the dark, so I just had my camera turned off to avoid sitting in this bright light. Yeah.
Do you want to give a 2 minute intro to, or 1 or 2 minute intro into your data? Managing data. You can tell the title.
Yeah. So next month, 8th of March at Project Northeast's new co-working space near Central Station in Newcastle, myself and others from the Digital Pathfinders team will be there going over using data for small businesses. It's going to be like working on the concepts of data from the ground up. Obviously, being here today, we already do have some pre-existing knowledge about data, as Adam has already taught us. But I'll be talking about data like in a software agnostic format. I won't really be focusing on one specific tool or software, so to speak. I'll just be talking about why data is important to small businesses, how to employ it, how to collect it, how to then share it with internal teams and external partners, and how all of those stages go on into creating a data strategy that works for your organization. And yeah, if you'd like to pop along, I'll just find the Eventbrite link where we can sign up. I believe we are almost at capacity, but there are a few spaces left. Let me just find the link.
I had no idea you're almost at capacity. That's brilliant. But yeah, so I think that the obviously, even as I was going through it today, you can probably see I could have gone off in lots of different directions because it's such a powerful tool, and I think it's powerful for the sort of basic users, if I can use that term, and power users alike from experience. But you still have to, like building a website with a website building tool, you still have to have some basic understanding of knowledge of what you're trying to do, and not just kind of, of course you can jump straight in there on certain things and create a simple tool. It's and Airtable's great for that. But if you're looking at something that's more holistic or of a larger scale, our advice would always be think about the data first, and then think about the tools that you're going to use to do it, before you just get stuck straight into what tools can do what. As I said at the beginning with the no code arcade, I think there's that feeling with no code of needing or wanting to be able to go in and have a play around. I think that's great. But in terms of any project you're thinking to do, it's worth spending that bit of time at the start just thinking through how you're going to do it. And I think sessions like the one Nathan will be giving, but also there's loads of stuff online as well, about how to think about data structures and the best way to structure your data is super helpful to do, because it's not quite the same as just doing a spreadsheet. It's a different way of managing, putting your data together. Does anyone have any questions before I move on to a few last slides? Yeah, take that as a positive, hopefully. Or that everyone's mind's just completely mushed. I know it's a lot to take in on an evening after a long day of work that we've all had. So I've just got a couple of last slides. I do this after pretty much every session that we do, but I do want to just give a quick shout out to some friends of ours at 100 Days of No Code. If you are looking at no code in general, this is a great place to start. There's some free stuff on there, there's some paid stuff on there, and there's a course that you can go on which is paid for, but it's Ben, who's in the room, I think has been on, but I think it's really valuable, particularly if you've got a very specific idea that you want to kind of explore further and look at actually building. It's a 30-day process intensive process to build a product within 30 days. So highly recommend 100 Days No Code as an option if you're thinking about getting into no code. There's tons of resources out there and we can't list them all, but Max has been good to us and is really sort of, I think, setting the bar to some extent in terms of learning spaces for no code, and is really kind of community focused. So I'd like to give him a shout out. This is us, nocodenortheast.com. If you're not a member of the community, please do join the community. We don't send loads of emails out. Hopefully anyone who's a member will know that. Generally speaking, it's one per month, possibly two, to tell you about the next things coming up. Obviously, as the arcade starts coming in, we've got a few other ideas and thoughts for events. We'll have to build those in as well, but we're not going to shower you with emails. So do join and find out about the next things that are coming up. And that's me for today. I've managed to pretty much finish on time, which anyone who knows me knows that that's pretty good going. So yeah, if there's anyone got any questions for the next 9 minutes, I'm more than happy to answer them. Otherwise, have a super lovely evening and yeah, keep in touch. We'll hopefully see you at the next No Code Northeast. Thanks, folks.
Thanks, Adam.
Thanks, Adam. That was great.
Thanks, Adam.
Yeah.
Yes,
Thank
Adam,
you.
great one.
See you next time.
See you soon.
Okay. Quick question, Adam. Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just unshared, don't worry.
All right. The recordings of the meetups are they online anywhere, or have you not managed to get them up there yet? I'm just not sure. I'm just looking in the wrong place.
Just youtube.com, and then I think these days it's isn't it? So it's like at No Code Northeast. Let me just put it out for you. Generally, it depends a little bit on my working week as to when that ends up getting up there.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, they get up within a couple of days of the sessions. It's just well, that's a channel link. But anyway, yeah, you should get there by just doing youtube.com and then / at, just trying it while I say it, at No Code Northeast. Yeah, that works as well. And yeah, we've got you've got Whale Sync, as I mentioned before. We've got a session that I did at Innovation Week about how innovation is driving the no code revolution. There's a session about Bubble, No Code for Good. Excel Point, who did a session on their things, and we've got Laura Richards, who did one about her startup journey with Bubble, and then the launch event, which is with Max from 100 Days No Code that I just mentioned. So there's some nice little back catalogue there. I know you're at a few of them, so but they are there, and anyone can access at any times. And some of them have got a lot more views than others, but they're they're all, in my view, very biased. They're all good. Any other questions?
Actually, I did have a question, Adam. I forgot to ask it. And maybe you did cover this with Stacker and some of the other tools, but
yeah,
when people are building apps, whether they're if it's a web app, what's the most straightforward way to put a login in a front end that will then integrate with Airtable? Is that something that Stacker does? Is it something you've done or you've heard of?
Stacker does our CRM system. The main reason we chose Stacker's not openly, it's not at least from in the no code space, it's not cheap, right? Because it got one of these sort of ways of working that is focused around almost like the number of apps that you're going to create, kind of thing. So it's quite expensive, but if you're a non-profit like Software City, you get it cheap. I managed to wrangle it for free because I wax lyrical about them. But Stacker's great because what it does is it builds that user authentication like out of the box. That's what from a starting point, that's what Stacker was. What it then does on top of that is it builds very, very, very fast interface building on top of that. So building the forms to enter data and building the pages to display data is like minutes. Do you know what I mean? The downside of it is it's very structured. It's very, you don't have much control over how it looks and how you've got kind of 6 different templates of pages. And I don't know if you saw our projects page there, for example. When I click on departments, it's almost exactly the same, but it's just the departments listed with a bit of extra detail. There's it's not bad, but it's more for sort of, let's say, business systems, where you've got a bunch of data and you want to give people access and allow them to see certain things. On that basis, with Stacker, you can literally have an app with Airtable. If you can sit there and sort of think your data structure and you know what the person, or it's an internal thing that you need to do really well, you can have a full app up and running in literally minutes now. Do you know what I mean? In the sense that we built a booking system for Proto, for example, for across here. When we took it over, we built a booking system for that, which effectively allowed it's an internal system. It's not an external booking, but it's an internal system to allow people to put bookings in. A bunch of people be able to look in, see a shared calendar, add bookings in there, share those bookings with other people, and then also for us to be able to do a read-only version of that in our CRM system that you just saw before, which is a separate app. And we did it in a over Zoom session in 35 minutes, 40 minutes. Literally built the whole system that where Sophie said to me, this is what we need, can we build it, kind of thing. That included resource booking, all sorts of things, like, people who are responsible, notifications, all sorts in like less than an hour. To come back to your question, now I'm going over time, but anyway, to come back to your question, I would probably say, I'd probably say in terms of the more web app, in terms of authentication for a web app that isn't just a business tool, let's say, the easiest, most accessible one is probably Softer, which you may or may not have heard of. That's like Software.
I think you mentioned that earlier, I think,
yeah. And Softer's a bit different in that it doesn't build the authentication in. You can do public sites with Softer from data from Airtable, but it allows you to put a login screen on. You've got to be quite careful because you've got to build everything into it, right? So when you put the login screen on, that's one thing, but then when you create a new page with Softer, you've got to make sure that you put the authentication on, that it's only visible to people who have logged in, right? And it literally, you build the login stuff screen by screen effectively. So if you want a forgotten password on there, you create a forgotten password screen. It's got a lot more flexibility than than Stacker in terms of what you can, how it can look and what you can build, but it's still quite structured. And because this is out of the box, drag and drop, quick fix type stuff. Do you know what I mean? We did create an app for someone recently where we used the power of Airtable functions. So it was basically a mix between Softer in terms of the authentication and displaying sort of these dashboards of results. So you had Softer for that bit. We didn't use Dropform for this one. We used, I'm going to forget the name of it. Ben, what's the name of the other form? Tally, sorry. So we used Tally for the forms, and then we used Airtable as the back end. And we took a lot of data from individuals into into Airtable, used a lot of calculations to create kind of averages, and then used that data to look at the averages of that data into organizations, and then created a role for an organization user. So you kind of have this system where individuals could fill out a load of data about mental health, and then an organization would be able to have administrators who could view that data as an overall dashboard, including flagging issues and all that kind of stuff. And again, you're talking about something that, think back to Drupal days, it would have taken weeks of development time, and it was a more complex one, but we built it in, best part of like 5 to 6 days of development time, and you know, that's with all the layers and also the planning and the database design, all that kind of stuff. Literally, you know, in terms of sitting down working, it was probably 5 or 6 days. So, you know, there was a lot of testing and things and alterations and iterations that went on after that, and there was a lot of hurdles we had to overcome in terms of the basics that you know that software provides, for example, in terms of layout, and we had to sort of compromise at times as you'd expect. But when you consider the speed of development, especially for people like yourselves in terms of being agency, you know, having a lot of the background knowledge that are kind of, you know, how to say, a sort of hobby someone playing around with that stuff might not have. The speed at which you can develop stuff is often a really good offset of just even trying out an idea or whatever.
Absolutely.
In a really short space of time.
Yeah, no, I can certainly see that. It does seem to be at that point where some of those gaps get filled and it becomes more, you know, then as long as the pricing is okay, tolerable, I'd say, then it can become production as well. But yeah, internally, I can see a business use for it internally for managing some custom projects that we run that we've never been able to find any software to manage it, and never had been brave enough to build it in-house. But Airtable is something I've wanted to look at for that. But there are parts of that then I want some clients to come in and enter some forms, and I think, well, I don't want public forms. You know, the lead generation is one thing, events and things like that is, you know, that's fine. But when I definitely want to know that client is filling in this form and that's their data. I don't want to start getting messy, dirty data.
Yeah, and the big question there is where you know, it comes down to how replicable that needs to be and all that kind of stuff. Because as I said before, I mean, in terms of building forms, it's a little bit buggy sometimes, particularly if you want to use sort of the widgets it comes with. But for basic data and gathering, Jotform has become a phenomenal tool, and it's something I used to hate with a passion a few years ago because I've never used it. It's fantastic, and it's got like things like you can use it for offline data capture on a iPad, where, you know, without having to be connected, and then it syncs up and all that kind of stuff. Which
that's nice.
Again, the sort of stuff that and the one I mentioned earlier on, which actually we've used a lot through the funded projects and things, is once someone's added the data in, it's got a really nice, which is very rare, PDF designer, which allows you to pull in and put the fields where you want them, and have signatures and have, you know, all that kind of stuff.
Very nice.
That then sends that PDF as an attachment to the user, or sends that PDF to you, or you can just go in and generate it later from a particular line of the data. So it's kind of, you know, it's got a lot of those tools. There's no doubt that using no code in general and using Airtable as well, it's a lot more dislocated than the concept of a joint, you know, and I always use it, as you can imagine. But thinking back the Drupal days, one of the big benefits of that was that you had Drupal and everything was in Drupal. That's one of the reasons we used it, because you could do the internal tools and the external tools, and it was all there, and it was in one place, and you develop it. But that came with a lot of setbacks. Obviously, with things like Airtable and these different apps and whatever, everything's a little bit more all over the place, and you've got to keep a bit more of a lid on things, particularly when you're talking about data. You know, even in terms of the integrations we do, privacy policies need to include the fact that you're holding data in a Jotform, as well as an Airtable database, as well as this thing, as well as that. You know, and all of that's got to be thought through. But in general, as I say, it just depends what you're doing with it. I definitely think that softer. I actually heard from someone in the know that softer is pretty much going to be pivoting, if they haven't done it already, to massively focusing on the business tools space, the internal tools almost, you know what I mean? Because the startup space, what they're finding with the startup space, which is where I'd say they position themselves up until now, is great, but it's not a big generator. But the business tool space, you know, as you just said, setting up simple things to automate processes inside of businesses, these sorts of tools and Airtable and similar are really it's really exciting. I think what they can do and what's possible, and the cost reduction and time, you know, speed to market is significant. But there'll always be almost always be some kind of offshoot with that, some sort of less design control or less, there'll be some level of perfection. So it reminds me quite a lot of the old days of coding, and this is as someone who wasn't a coder, when you used to kind of go and copy and paste scripts off the internet to piece things together, because that was the easiest way to find stuff that was already out there and do things quickly. There's an element of that, and it's a bit more secure now, but not if you don't know what you're doing. And that was a whole other conversation we had at our round table about who holds the keys in terms of security with this stuff. But anyway, all in all, yeah, Airtable's great. It's not great for authentication. As you say, if you want to do external forms, you can password protect most of the forms. So if you want to do one form that you're happy to give multiple people a password for, then that works okay. If you want to do multiple forms and for each, a form for each client that you want to then password protect each one, but then obviously there's an overhead then in terms of upkeeping that if you make changes and what have you. But if you really want to do it in a kind of holistic way, I'd say probably Stacker or a simple softer application would be the best way to go. All of your user data, just to be clear, all of your user data can tie into a people table. That's how we do it on our CRM. So for example, our users are made up of a certain role within the people within the CRM.
So they're still people with a role. Yeah,
exactly. So it just means that you can then start to build quite a lot on top of that. If you are, for example, putting all your clients in there and giving certain ones access and stuff like that, you've got quite a lot of power. And as I said before, you can obviously we use Stacker specifically because it allowed us to give our CRM data access to project partners. So we've got a project partner space where they add monitoring data into the system, but they only see the data from that project. And then we've got our CRM that everyone can see everything in. And Stacker, you can, and then we've got the Proto one, which I mentioned before, which just has the Proto booking stuff in. It's all going into one database, but Stacker allows us to have multiple authenticated different apps doing different things off that same data. And in that level, it's kind of, it's expensive, but it's kind of, we've got 5 apps running off it now, off that one bit of data. So whatever it is, it costs, I think it's about $159 a month, is not that expensive for 5 apps. Do you know what I mean? It's you add it all together, it's relatively cheap, and there's no development cost because we're doing it all in house. So yeah. Anyway, I'll stop ranting now. But
no, all good. Thank you.
Great. Right. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, Adam.
Again, any further questions or things, reach out and No Code Northeast channels. But have a great evening, and we'll see you next time, hopefully. Take care.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.